This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! NIcolás Cup winners!
Here comes Rangers through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders NIcolás Cup.
Nico Lodeiro leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
We want to win. It's Seattle Sounders, bro.
Porter says cheated.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take the Open Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes. We are turning this into a Friday feature that we are calling What We Learned This Week. And whenever we do this, the idea is to have Niko Moreno on with us, the incomparable Niko Moreno. Welcome back. You're like a co-host. I'm going to just call you a co-host now on these things.
Hey, man, I finally made it, man. I'm excited to be on. Always happy to collaborate and be a part of this Sounder at Heart family. You know, I've always thought I was like a, stepchild, something,
Yeah, distant cousin.
Yeah, distant cousin, And
but
I'm
now
happy
you're
that-
living in the main house. It's like
I'm in the house,
you're
man.
like you're the Fresh Prince.
I got a room. That's right. I'm in Uncle Phil's house. I dig it.
Exactly. I like that. We have to call it the Fresh Prince of Sounder at Heart.
Hey, man, I like it, man. It's excited. I'm excited to be on. I'm excited to continue with this content. I feel like I've heard some really good feedback from people, and I do read all the messages. I appreciate them all. I don't comment a lot on the Sounder at Heart page, but I do read everything you guys say. It's much appreciated. I'm just excited to bring a different perspective or swag or whatever you think I bring. I'm just excited to be here. So I'm excited.
Well, we didn't record last week because we really didn't have a lot to go on. The Sounders played a preseason game that was only available if you ponied up money to subscribe to a Danish website and navigated all that entails. This week, though, against their best efforts, this game, one of the two games they played, was available on YouTube. It allowed us to watch the games. There was definitely some enterprising readers on Sounder at Heart who, again, you could subscribe to a Swedish website this time, and you could watch the first game against Norrköping. But the Hammarby game was available to everyone. We're probably going to talk mostly about that. That's also when most of the starters played. So let's just jump right into this, or let's jump into this game. Let's start there. The Sounders tied Hammarby 2-2 in the second game. They tied Norrköping 3-3 in the first game. But again, let's talk about the second game, because I think that was where more interesting stuff happened. This is where most of the starters were playing. What were your big takeaways from this game?
I am encouraged, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm kind of excited about how aggressive the Sounders have been in terms of concepts on both sides of the ball. The amount of players that they commit forward on both the attacking end to crash the box, to go off of certain overloads on one side, and then the change to the entire other side and really catch teams off guard has been very interesting to me. And then defensively, how high they're pressing, the way they're pressing. So that's my first thought overall, just in terms of concepts. I do get a little bit nervous about trigger points and discipline and field awareness, because they did get caught a couple of times in this one where they were a little too high. The press didn't get there, and all of a sudden you're in a foot race. You're trying to correct, and that's how two of the goals came about. So, but I do like that. I like the exciting component. I like the fact that they are shaking things up. If there was one very big criticism over this team last season, was the lack of creativity or not being as predictable, and I feel like this year I've seen a lot of that on both sides of the ball, so I like that. Standout players overall, man. I really like Ferreira. Very free, very open. Early in the game, he puts a wonderful ball into Jordan Morris, where he comes all the way back. He's tracking back. He gets the ball, sees the space, puts it for Jordan Morris. Unfortunately, Jordan can't finish, but how active and how intelligent he is about where to be and when to be and when to release, I thought that was very, very good. Obviously, Manungu, once he comes in, I thought, aside from just the assist, he just consistently pushed on that right side. I thought he was very good throughout the game. I really enjoyed the way that Jordan Morris is getting to certain spots. And again, everybody that follows my work knows that I am very honest. I'm very objective when it comes to Jordan Morris. I'm not just going to praise him for no reason. I thought that he put himself in some really good positions in this one. So there's nothing better from a system where the whole point of it is to be unpredictable, to be aggressive, and to crash the box than to have a guy like Jordan moving the way he did. So I really like what he did throughout the game. And then on a lower scale, the last one I'll talk about was Obed Vargas and how good he was on the ball when he did get on the ball, how he was able to break through pressure with the ball. So those were my standouts for that game.
Yeah, and Obed also was a little unlucky not to have a goal. He had, I think he had two shots. One got blocked, and then he made another one that got saved off the post. So he was in the box on that. He looked pretty good. You point out the pass that Ferreira made to Morris, and one of the things I liked about that is it's very similar to the pass that De La Vega made to Morris in the I guess it was the previous game. Where he just sort of hits a sort of blind ball, but like the thing I like about it is that it appears to be a repeatable action that they're working on. That this is exactly that when these players are dropping into that space, they know that Jordan is going to make these runs, and they know that he's probably going to be able to outrun a lot of defenders. It wasn't. I probably would have liked to see Jordan finish that a little bit better. He tried to shoot it with the outside of his right boot instead of going with maybe a simpler left-footed shot, but he was he was getting pressure. It wasn't like a gimme chance, but Jordan also had a really nice pass to Paul Arriola that was a little bit more of a gimme finish that, I don't know, maybe it skipped a little on Arriola, but he skies the shot.
He should have had it.
You like the concept again of the play. You like that Jordan is making these runs. You like that Jordan is seeing this run that Arriola is making. The Sounders got themselves into a lot of really good positions in this game. They scored 5 goals in 2 games, but they easily could have scored another 2 or 3 goals. And this was really a consistent, something we saw consistently during this Spanish trip is that, they scored 12 goals in essentially 4.5 games in 405 minutes. That works out to be about 2.7 goals per 90 if you really want to break down the stats. But that's really good, and these aren't necessarily the best teams in Europe, but they are competitive teams. They're good teams. And the Sounders created a ton of chances. they were maybe a little leaky defensively. They did give up 8 goals during that same time, but we did see it against, especially against Hammarby, where it felt like they could have put that game away. They could have gone up, I think 3-0. They probably could have gone up 4-1 pretty easily. They ended up, or 3-1, and they ended up obviously tied 2-2. So there's work to be done, but again, lots of positive stuff, especially going forward.
Yeah, man, look, people, and look, I did a radio show in Argentina last week because there were a whole bunch of crazy rumors about Yeimar leaving to his former club, Santa Fe, and I'm shutting that down. But I've done a couple of other shows with these specific people, and they were asking me about the outlook of the team. And they were like, wow, you don't sound as pessimistic as last year. Look, I'm not pessimistic. I'm just very honest and frank. And going into certain parts of the season, I thought that the team wasn't going on the right route. I can genuinely say that I'm excited about this team. I'm excited about the approach, the style of play, the game module, the specific individualities on the field. And a lot of that I'm getting off for these games. And look, you could criticize the fact that, you're in Europe or you're not playing against the best of Europe. Look, if you have no idea about the landscape of soccer, Atletico Madrid is not going to give you a preseason game when they're mid-season and they're working throughout, Copa del Rey or whatever they're currently playing on. So let's just put that on the side. But what these teams are doing for you is allowing you to work on all of these concepts, ideas, patterns, movements, everything that you need to see. Fitness, of course, that's number one. So to me, man, it gives me a little excitement I haven't had in a couple of years for this team. And it comes because of the style of play, and it comes because of a little bit of those gambles that they're currently doing on it. And if you look at that second game, that's likely going to be your starting lineup at Antigua to start off your 2025 campaign. So with that said, man, I just think that there is progress. This team is better, in my opinion, in many ways that they were at the beginning of 2024. Because I don't know about you, but I was trying to see every stream possible. Look, for this couple of games, I was everywhere looking for streams. I was YouTubing, Googling. I was calling people. I mean, I have a problem. I mean, at 4 a.m. I woke up trying to figure things out.
You got up at 4 a.m. for that one. Oh, my.
I got up at 4 a.m.
I did not.
You know what? I was so excited because I found a link that said event coming up. And then when it started, it was a FIFA game with Hammarby and Sounders, and I was really upset about it. So I think I put something on Blue Sky, and I should have probably clarified with some context. I probably sound crazy, but yeah, that's why I mentioned video games, because I was excited to watch the games and I just couldn't see it. So in this second one, man, I'm truly excited. I think there's some really good stuff coming from the Sounders team, even defensively, where there were some issues, and you mentioned that. You should not give up a goal in the 88th minute where Georgie Manungu is too high and your three-man backline is too high, and the pressure. It looked like
there was also some miscommunication between Cody Baker and Nuhu, and that's honestly both goals. Both goals seemed similar, where it looked like there was some confusion about who was supposed to be sliding out and taking, which was essentially an open shot from close range. You don't like to see that, but those are the kind of things that get worked out. The chances are Cody Baker is probably not going to be on the, that's whatever. It's not his fault. There's a combination of faults to go around here. I guess if there's one concerning area, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but Albert Rusnak did go out with some sort of injury. The Sounders told me that it was precautionary and that they didn't seem super worried about it. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he doesn't play against Louisville. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he's coming off the bench in Antigua and they sort of like just don't rush him back, essentially. But they don't have to, because this is a team that has real depth. I mean, as it is now, if you go with how they've been using the lineups, one of Morris, Ferreira, Rusnak or De La Vega is probably going to be coming off the bench. And if it's Rusnak to start with, that just makes it an easier decision, because I don't see any reason that Ferreira and De La Vega can't sit in those kind of dual 10 spots behind Jordan Morris. In fact, it might suit them really well. And De La Vega played with the first group this game. I don't know if we should really read a whole lot into that. My assumption is the Sounders just wanted to see Ferreira get a few more minutes with Jordan Morris and sort of the first team starters. I don't know if that's the one spot where I'm not sure that's settled who the starter is. But he looked good at least in the highlights against Norrköping, and that game also had some, if you just look at the highlights again, which is mainly what we were looking at, the Sounders had some very encouraging play in that one. Paul Rothrock only played 30 minutes, which was the plan, and he scored a goal. Trevion Sousa, who is much more of an unknown coming into this camp for a lot of people, he is sort of a pretty classic left wing back, left-footed player. That was I thought, amazing touch that he had, an even better pass from Josh Atencio to score that one. And he just calmly slots it in. And then what was the other goal in that game?
I can't remember.
Shoot.
Look, what I would say.
Go ahead.
What I would say is this: I have a hard time just going off highlights. And yes, JP, who's looked amazing and who
yes.
Going into what I'm kind of going to tell you here is I have a hard time just going off highlights. So because I was so frustrated that I couldn't see that game, I did a little bit of the groundwork to get some inside information. And if there were two guys that kept coming up in conversations were De La Vega and JP. Again, I did not see the entirety of the game. I tried so hard, and me and you know what we tried to do to get a full 90 minutes of that game, but we couldn't do it. But what I heard was that there was a lot of stuff that wasn't in the highlights of Pedro De La Vega beating guys off the dribble, getting to good positions, making passes to a couple of chances that didn't come to have chances, but should have gone to have chances, where there was a bad dribble, there was a bad decision. But if that player makes the right cut, if that player makes the right pass, it's either a shot on goal or it's a near miss. The engagement part of De La Vega's defensive pressure and triggers under this formation has turned some heads, which to me, man, is important, because when I thought about Pedro De La Vega, I'm thinking creative, dynamic, shifty, but I'm not thinking defensively. And the fact that he has added that to his repertoire and he's out there just working defensively and doing certain things, that makes me excited. And the other guy was JP. JP apparently, and I quote, polish on the ball, accurate with his passing, understanding his spacing. That to me is great, right? They're telling me that he looks like he covered twice the space that he would last year. So those are all good things that I'm hearing, right? So I can only base myself on the highlight, sure, but I still won't make an assumption because that's just a highlight. But I will do a lot with what I'm being told. And I do take that very confidently from where I'm getting it. And that to me tells me that this squad with those players can be really, really exciting.
Yeah, I've been very encouraged by JP. I've always been, or not always, I've been interested in sort of the De La Vega narrative going through this offseason. And there was sort of this prevailing sense that almost like it was a sunk cost at this point, that he was somehow so bad last year that there's not really any real hope of him coming good this year. And I'll push back in that in a couple ways. One is that I thought De La Vega actually showed some promise last year. And I think but even then you have to understand that he struggled so much with health to get healthy. He was talking about at the end of the year, for the first time all year, that he felt like he was playing himself, that he was finally able to not be worried about injury, and he was in his own head a lot. And it wasn't just the injury. It was that he felt like he was getting pulled off earlier than he was used to. And so that was sort of playing mind games with him. And he just looks like a totally different player right now. Physically, he looks different. He looks so much like he's in much, much better shape. He looks confident. He looks sharp. I've been really impressed with him. And he's someone who I don't think the Sounders necessarily need. They obviously went to the conference final last year without getting almost anything from him. And if he's a productive player, that's essentially like a new signing. I mean, there's right now, there's every reason to think that he can be a productive player right now.
Yeah, look, I said this in Dobbins Scorchers. To me, Niko Moreno, the Sounders are going in with 5 acquisitions to 2025 in terms of just nuances. Of course, Ferreira and Paul Arriola, but Pedro de la Vega, because you actually get him for an entire season, you get him with an entire preseason, and Paul Rothrock and Georgie Menungu. Those are guys that you found as rough gems in the middle of the jungle, and you've polished it, you cleaned it, you try to make it, and you see the shine. It's not completely out there. You still got to go get it pressurized and nice and cut, or whatever you do to a diamond. Because I'm no expert here, but whatever you do to that diamond, you can do it this season. So I'm excited to see what both of those guys do. Paul on the productiveness, intelligence, instinct part of just being a guy that makes things happen, that scores goals, and Georgie in being a headache every single game to any defense and giving you a guy that's going to beat guys off the dribble, that you're going to get to that end line, and maybe you achieve a great cross 5 out of 10 times, but those 5 times are going to be opportunities for you to score. So those are the guys that I'm looking at, and I'm saying, watch out for the Sounders, because maybe they were a little quiet in the offseason. But if you look in between the lines and you really go deep dive into it, they have a couple of players that you did not have at the beginning of 2024. They have a whole preseason. They have a whole new sense of play time and chemistry that, man, I mean, it can make this team basically like they're having 5 new players into the squad.
Yeah. And one of the things that was so encouraging about it, again, this is just a play, but the assist that Menungu had to Roldan in this game against Hammarby was just so encouraging to see, because it wasn't the most complicated pass, but it was a smart pass. He sees this run coming like from a place you don't necessarily expect to see a wing back, because he's cutting way inside on the right side, and he's just making this clever run into the box. Menungu picks him out, and it's a relatively simple ball, but it's the kind of ball that you sort of, it's easy to take for granted. There's not a lot of, he has to see that run, he has to put it in the right place, and it ends up being a pretty easy finish for Alex Roldan. But I love to see that from Menungu, because it wasn't like it was some really high energy breaking down a guy off the dribble. He just was calmly seeing his teammate make a good run. And that's, if he starts to have that stuff as well as the dynamism, as well as the excitement, now we're really cooking.
Absolutely, man. Look, in the Spanish community, I have something called the Nico stamp of improvement, and he has the El Rolo, a stamp of improvement right off the bat. And I think that what that tells you, at least for the people that follow my Spanish work, is this is a guy that has all the tools to be a game breaker and a contributor for this team. And I've had guys like Nuhu in my wallet, Alex Roldan, Christian Roldan. I have a pretty good sense of it. I've had my couple of misses, I'm not going to lie to you, but we will talk about those. But I think that Georgie Menungu can be a guy that, to me, man, he could essentially be a TAM sort of signing without being a TAM sort of signing, TAM productivity without having a TAM salary.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
It's getting to be that time of year when you need to figure out how to watch Sounders games. If you're an Alliance member, you are getting a free subscription to MLS Season Pass, and you're covered. Similarly, if you're a T-Mobile subscriber, you're also covered. But if you're going to have to pay for one, you may as well give us some of that money. By using the link sounderatheart.com/MLS Season Pass, you'll help support independent media while also getting access to every Sounders game, every other MLS game, MLS 360, and all sorts of other content. Just to make things extra easy, we'll put a link in the show notes too. Thanks. Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Haxon Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Yeah. I mean, and you look at what the world market is telling us about wingers right now,
Yes.
and is that they are the most expensive players, and they are also the players that have the most variance in performance that are so hard to predict. And if the Sounders can bring in a potentially, he doesn't have to be an elite winger, but if he can just be, and Paul too, for that matter, if they can basically get two competent wingers for essentially no money, which is what we're really talking about here, that's such a huge competitive advantage. And I agree with you. The Rothrock thing is funny because, he got hurt at the end of last year. And so there was a little bit of out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And he hadn't played until this game. And then he pops up and he scores a goal in his first game. And I guess he was playing as a wing back, which was somewhat unexpected. It's going to be interesting to see what have you made of this formation change? I guess that's a good place to take this conversation. Is the Sounders have been talking a lot about going to three in the back. From what I can tell, they have been doing that. But what's interesting is it's not dramatically different personnel than you would expect to be them playing with if there was a 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, it's been it's worked. I mean, it's been successful. When I look at the roster and with maybe the caveat that one of your most talented players might be the odd man out, because I think Pedro de la Vega doesn't quite fit if you have everybody available and ready for this team. I think it fits, man. I think it gives this Sounder squad a little bit of a nuance where they can be aggressive with the amount of players that they bring forward, but they can also be ready for any sort of counter. They have a lot of speed in their center back position, with maybe the exception of Jackson Reagan, right? But you got Nuhu, you got Yeimar, and then they can correct for any sort of lack of speed that Jackson might have. And then Jackson is your quarterback. He's back there sitting in the pocket, swinging the passes wherever you need him to go. He can get a little forward. Yemer is usually the last man back. If you look at this couple of preseason games, Yemer's always the last man back because he has that ability, that speed, corrective speedness to just get back, get the ball forward. So I like it. I really do. And in terms of Paul and even Georgie, where they can be options in that wing back position, I think it fits, man. Because if I'm trying to get width out of my wing backs and I have my midfielders being those that can be creative and maybe they can push the ball in certain pockets and they can find those half spaces, I become a really unpredictable team. And you got Jordan Morris making all kinds of mayhem and runs, and you got Ferreira where he can catch the ball anywhere on the pitch and be dangerous with it. That's all good things. So I enjoy it. I like it. I still think that the 4-2-3-1 with these same concepts, right? Because again, the Sounders always build out with three in the back. I mean, that's not going to change. Personnel changes here and there, but when it comes to the concepts, they're very much the same. So I just feel like it's a fit, and I feel like it gives Seattle a true second option that when Portland, Vancouver, or whoever you play most in a season goes out and sits and hits the whiteboard, they could truly not know which way Seattle's going to come at them.
Yeah.
What formation they're going to hit you with and what they might not hit you with.
And what personnel they might use. I mean, I kind of like the idea that that this is the way that it's lining up is that it almost naturally allows you to bench any one of those four attacking pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And that you are probably going to have a Paul Rothrock or a Georgie Manungu available off the bench, and that you are going to have, and if you want to switch to, no wing back, or you almost can play without wing backs. Sometimes you can play with real wingers and just three center backs. I mean, there's a lot of formational flexibility that's built in here with their personnel that, I do think lends itself to playing in multiple competitions, which I think people may or may not realize that Concacaf Champions Cup started this week, and it was a good reminder that there are no given results in this thing. Calvary beat Pumas yesterday.
Yep.
We saw Real, I think it was a Real Esteli beat Tigres. Is that right? Oh, no, was a
no. It was Tigres.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's been some pretty. I mean, these are all road upsets, or road games. So it's not like, or these were the underdogs were sort of getting their road results, but a lot of interesting results, and it's a good reminder that there's nothing is guaranteed in this tournament.
And look, to be honest, I mean, Real Esteli was the better team in that game. Like it wasn't just we got a goal, we sat back and parked the bus. If you look at the game, and I did, I had to go and rewatch it. Thankfully, I have a reminder on my Comcast. Oops, I don't know if I can say that. On my cable.
It's okay, don't worry.
Oh, my bad.
No, don't need. That's totally fine.
Oh, okay. Well, they're no sponsors. They're not getting no.
Yeah. We don't got to give too much away, but that's okay. You can mention it here.
Yeah. So I got a reminder basically that I record certain games, and they recorded it, went back, looked at it, and I was shocked on how much better the non-Mexican team looked like. I mean, and Tigres is like a foundation. They're one of the top teams in Liga MX. So you're right. When Seattle's going to play in Antigua, I'm thinking, walk in the park. We're going to go in there, dominate, kick back, smoke some cigars. It might not be that. So this is something for Brian to hear. And I know he hears Sounder Heart. He reads Sounder Heart.
Yeah,
so he probably listened to this. But do not take Antigua lightly, man, because all these teams they have the opportunity to beat an MLS team, and that makes you play better.
Yeah. So the other game that was kind of that was a little crazy was a team from the Dominican Republic called Sabao FC scored very early against Chivas, and then Chivas scored equalized in the 10th minute of stoppage time. Just like a series of absolutely wild results. And so basically there's been 4 games played, and the only one that went really like according to the chalk, I suppose, was Monterrey beating Forge FC, which is a Canadian team, 2-0. But I think both those goals came in the second half. So even that one was pretty competitive. It's it's a fun tournament. It's a shame that we don't treat Concacaf Champions Cup with the same reverence as we treat the UEFA Champions League, because it is a very fun tournament. It's a very exciting tournament. There's a lot more competitive games in this than I think people sometimes realize. But anyway, let's move on. Nico, you have what else is going on in the any news bits you want to talk about?
Man, I don't know if news bits, man, but I was, we talked about being concerned about Albert Rusnak's injury. And it does make me nervous because it's not just the injury. If you go back on that game, you can hear Brian yelling, "Go down, Albert, go down." Although you've heard certain things from the club, I feel like Brian is very good at hiding certain things. That's why
I don't know how much to read into what they told me, other than they don't feel like. I just think they're trying not to panic, but I don't know. I don't take it for gospel. That's for sure. But go ahead.
Yeah. So you know the Paul Rothrock thing where we didn't know, he like missed the practice, they didn't miss the practice, and all of a sudden he's out for the year. I'm not saying this is the case here, but it makes me concerned, especially for a guy that admitted to us, to everybody, that he's taking cortisone shots to the hip because he has a chronic thing going on. So to me, it makes me nervous. And me being me, having a whole bunch of time on my hands before the Sounders got back to the Pacific Northwest, I was looking at something that I want to talk to you about. And let's bring everybody in. If you want to comment, if you want to talk about it, Nico's putting a little bit of a point of conversation out here. Edward Atuesta was signed by Orlando City, and he's very clearly going to be a guy that's going to be a starter for the Orlando City franchise and Oscar Pareja down there in Florida. I know for a fact that in January, so not too long ago, there were a couple of MLS teams that were interested in Nicolás Lodeiro's services because they understand that he's nothing more than a depth piece in Orlando. If, for some reason, there was a possibility to get some sort of Paul Arriola type situation going into Nicolás Lodeiro, and maybe Seattle wouldn't have to pay his whole salary and there could be some sort of conversation, would you or would you not be willing to bring back Nicolás Lodeiro in the team's, anniversary year? Well, not really anniversary year because that was last year, but going into a very important year.
Yeah.
And into a Club World Cup, and a guy that could either fit in deeper down in the midfield, whether he's a holding mid or not, once Obed goes or he stays or whatever happens with Obed, if there's any changes down there, or if he could be a guy that could help you, play right next to Albert, or if you go back to your 4-2-3-1, play some of that cam. Would you be interested in something like that to bring Nicolás Lodeiro from Orlando back to Seattle and having kind of a goodbye tour that he didn't quite get a year ago?
Yeah, so I have to admit, I would have some trepidation about it only because Nico is a very competitive guy, and I think the Sounders have built a roster where they don't need a Nico Lodeiro type. They don't necessarily need a veteran. They don't need another veteran to, stabilize things. But I will also say that Nico had a really good season last year. He had sort of a real bounce back season. Like he was not great his last year in Seattle. He was very good for Orlando last year. He had a goal and 7 assists in only 1,700 minutes. You look at his rate stats, meaning like goals per or his assists per 90, progressive passes per 90. All that stuff is among the best in the league. He was very, very good last year. And that was with playing a role. He only played 1,700 minutes last year. He only started about half of his appearances. And that tells me that Nico probably has had a little bit of a mind shift change. One of the things that made his last season in Seattle tough, I think, was that he wasn't quite ready to be a backup. Like I think he did a good job of not being disruptive, of being a good soldier, of being, a leader in the locker room, even when he wasn't happy. But I don't think he was happy, right? During a lot of that last year. But last year he showed that he could be a very useful player off the bench. And I think if the Sounders are able to have a conversation with him where it's made clear that everyone's on the same page about what they want from him, and if he can be a spot starter for you, if he's someone that you can bring in off the bench, and he's not going to be playing over De La Vega, he's probably not going to be playing over Ferreira, he's probably not going to be playing over Rusnak, but if he's somewhere after them, I don't see why not. I mean, you're going to be playing at least 42 games. There is a very reasonable path to getting to 50 games. There's going to be plenty of minutes to go around. And I think Nico Lodeiro is a player who you'd be crazy not to bring in if it's for the right price and if you're convinced he's got the right mindset.
Absolutely. And that's where I think under the right price, you can get a guy that is proven, he's experienced. If I'm looking at international tournaments, and I can tell you right now that in last year's Concacaf Cup games, there are a couple of coaches that played Orlando last season who I have a pretty good relationship with. And they were both a little bit shocked that they spent so much time prepping for Nico when Nico maybe, I don't know if they didn't realize that he was, kind of a backup, but they prepare for him. So having a guy like Nico going into a CONCACAF Cup, he has a trajectory, a resume, a specific sort of put some respect to my name situation where, man, for the right price, I would love to have him. I'm hoping Albert is okay, and I really do.
Yeah,
and I think he's a guy that I'm willing to count on. But if you need someone else, and Pedro de la Vega is very young still, and maybe they want him to do other things. Why not having a guy like that, an experienced guy?
You can never be too deep.
You could never be too deep, right? It's kind of like the Kim Ki-hee thing, but
right, exactly. Exactly. Kim Ki, they didn't need to go out and sign Kim Ki-hee, but if Kim Ki-hee falls in your lap, you pick up the phone.
100%. So I'm just
to me the same thing with Nico.
I'm just spitballing here, but considering that there are other clubs interested in MLS, there is no doubt in my mind, knowing Nico as a person and knowing how much he loves the city and how hard it was for him to leave this fan base, he'd say yes in a second. So,
well, we know his son is probably the biggest cheerleader there is for that move, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's one of those things where, man, I could see it happen, and honestly, I would selfishly be very excited about it. But I want to hear what the audience got to say. So if you're listening to this podcast, hit up the comment, hit me up, hit Jeremiah, write a letter.
I mean, the reality is the Sounders don't have a ton of salary cap flexibility. A story came out this week. I wrote about it, how MLS announced that teams that get to the Club World Cup have an extra $750,000 of GAM, and then the ability to basically take a loan out against 26 and 27 for another 1.25. I don't really imagine the Sounders are going to do the loan thing because that's how you get yourself in trouble. And the 750 was already baked into the numbers that were out there. But the Sounders do have, based on the math that I've done, the Sounders seem to have enough room in their salary budget to go sign a U22 player, which I think is their top priority right now. But then I think they still do have room beyond that to sign another, veteran minimum type. And geez, hard to imagine a better, like, you're just not going to get more bang for your buck. If that's the deal you can get them on, again, that's a big if. I don't know that that's really what you can do, but man, 6 months ago, if you had asked me if the Sounders could get Kim Keehee for almost nothing, I would have said, no, of course not. But, weird things happen in the soccer world. And when players want to be someplace, they tend to be able to make it happen.
Yeah. And again, when I look at that roster by Orlando City, and I know that Araujo's going to be the main guy, that Atuesta is going to be the main guy, that once Wilber Cartagena gets over the injury, he could be another guy. Man, maybe it's a way for them to just open up a spot. They go get another guy. And man, it's an opportunity that once again, Seattle could be doing smart business the exact same way they did with Ferreira, with Areola. So, hey, man, sign me off for it.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a fun one. That would definitely be a fun one. It would be, I would be very curious to see what the reaction is. I think most fans would be excited about it. It seems like people were understanding of the thinking behind getting a Kim Keehee. And I would think again, it's a similar mindset. And it talk about a team that gets real, like, that's a deep team. It is a very deep team if they're able to.
I was looking at your depth chart story, right? And I mean, at DM, right? I mean, Nico could fill that DM spot, that holding mid spot. He's been doing it for Orlando City. When he was here, he was one of the guys that covered the most space in the team, right? He ran the most miles. He did that for Orlando City. And when I look at the depth chart right now, I mean, you at DM, you got Obed and Leyva on one side, and you got Alex and JP in the other. Why not have a guy that could play either side? And or if you needed him to play a little bit higher, he could probably do that for you too. So, man, I feel like it feels more of a need than even Kim Keehee's situation, unless you end up letting go of a guy like Stuart Hawkins somewhere else and things like that.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. So I guess on the other end of the roster, or on the Sounders probably have the other thing that came out in this roster release, or this roster rule release, is that it clarified some of the changes that are coming to the roster rules. There's essentially now a 31st spot on the roster, and it allows maybe an opening for someone like a Snyder Brunel or a Kalani Kosarienzi. Anyone that is sort of like on the fringes of the roster or that aren't signed to first team rosters that have been impressing you that you think might have a chance to make this team?
Kalina is the guy that comes to mind. Kalina Kosa, and I kill his name all the time, but he's the guy to me that his number pops up, that I've heard good things from sources in Spain, that he's been a standout. I've watched 2 full games. The first one, Puca's Academia, and then obviously this last one against Hammerby. And in both of those, I thought that he could have been a guy that would have made things a little bit different on that side, because I kind of went back and I thought, hey, what did I see from him in the first game that maybe could have played out in this one? And now this is no knock on Alex. I'm not saying that. I think Alex will continue to be the guy on that right wing side. But there were times where I was like, man, I think Kalani could have got to that ball. Or I think maybe Kalani could have pressed a little bit harder, because he's a different build than Alex, right? He's a little bit more physical. He gets to certain balls.
He's a real athlete too. I mean, he is like, he is an athlete. He's just like a little spark plug of a player. He can get up and down the line really easily. He plays bigger than his height. he had that great goal against Phoenix in the Open Cup last year. He's capable of doing those kind of little things. I like him a lot. He's also got a great personality. I think the Sounders mostly see him as a wing back. He's played a little bit on the left, but he was a defensive midfielder all through college, so he's got a little bit of positional flexibility, which I know the Sounders love. I would be thrilled if the Sounders signed him. But I've really liked Snyder Brunell too. And I don't know, they might be able to sign them both. But Brunell is someone who I think has a really high ceiling. And I liked him a lot at Defiance. And, I don't think he's necessarily ready to contribute to the first team, but I would be okay with signing him to like one of these off roster spots.
Yeah, and the thing about Brunell is that he gives you another guy that could play in the interior of that 3-5-2 or 3-4-3 or whatever three-man formation that you can think of, because I think Paul played as a wingback because I don't see, and I don't know if the coaching staff sees him as a guy that can play and be as productive on those inside channels as he is out wide and, crash in the box for certain positions. I feel like under this formation, you need a little bit more creativity, patience, pace. You got to be able to take your time with the ball. And I think that Brunell is a guy that could do more of those things than a Paul Rothrock. Paul Rothrock has a lot of great qualities to his game, but I feel like those are exploited more out on the flanks and out on that 4-2-3-1 formation than it does under these three-man formations, whatever one you want to pick. So because of that, I would not mind, and I think that it would be an asset to have a guy like Brunell, similar to why I think they're so high on Sebastian Gomez, who unfortunately I have not seen enough of. I went back and I looked at that Puca's Academia game, and I just didn't get enough. I didn't watch the first game in this one, but it sounded like he got maybe 15 minutes or something like that. So
yeah, he hasn't stood out to me as much in this preseason. I've seen him a fair amount at Defiance. I like him at Defiance. I think he's a good player, but I just think he's a little farther away from being like he's got real potential, but I think he's very much more on the potential side than on the finished product side. Whereas Brunell, I think in a pinch can give you something now a little bit more easily.
And on that end, I did want to ask you something, and I'll ask it here in front of everybody because maybe people have the same question. Osa said that Rosario, how confident would you be in him being a guy that can contribute? Because if there's something that I have not gotten out of this Marbella camp is any sort of indication that Danny Musovski is a safe bet when it comes to being the other forward or the guy coming off the bench. I haven't heard it. I haven't seen it. And that concerns me. So can he be a guy that helps out? I mean, man, this is tough.
I don't know. Rosario has a good body. He's obviously got a good pedigree. There are things about his game that I like. Like he's composed in the box. Seems like he's got pretty good feet, but he just doesn't strike me as physical enough. He doesn't strike me as, explosive enough. I'm a little worried about, I just don't feel like I've seen him stand out as much as I would like to have seen him stand out. Like he's going to score some goals. He's a useful player, but I don't know if he's necessarily going to unseat Musovski, if he's an upgrade over Musovski. And Musovski, I mean, give him credit. He did have an assist in the first game.
He did.
So
he did.
I don't want to say he's been he should have had he had a goal that was called back against Puskás. So it's not like he's been completely invisible for in this preseason. But yeah, I mean, I think that's an area for potential upgrade. I don't know if De Rosario is really the player you upgrade him with. If the Sounders could trade Musovski and actually get something, I mean, I don't think it would be crazy to to sign a De Rosario as sort of as an emergency player, and it allows you to trade Musovski if you can get something for him. I'm not saying I'm like sold on Musovski as the backup, but I guess I'm just not that worried. When you have Ferreira and Morris, I just don't know how much you really need Musovski. You need a player that's much better than Musovski, I guess is what I'm saying. Like you're going to be going with a somewhat unknown player in that position, I think.
Rapid question right here, right now, A or B? A, you go out there and bring yourself a Lodeiro to give you depth at center midfield, and you go get a U22 striker in the summer, or you flip that around and you go get yourself a U22 center midfielder and then go find an experienced veteran up top. What would you rather do, A or B?
I think I'd probably rather have Lodeiro and a U22 forward.
I agree.
I feel like you're a little bit more set at. I feel like you have a path to. You have plenty of options in center midfield that are of a variety of ages, and so I think Lodeiro sort of complements you there and gives you a little bit more of a bridge to the future. But you have a path to the future, whereas the forward situation is a little less clear. I think you want. Jordan's going to be the starter, I think, for the foreseeable future. And then you have Ferreira too, but there's just not a lot in the pipeline for at forward. And I think you want to stock, if you can bring in a U22 forward to sort of like boost that pipeline, I think that's probably the better move.
Co-sign that 100%.
Well, Nico, it's been good. I think we went through everything. I think we emptied the Rolodex here.
I think we did, man. And, that's not to say that some of the guys that we didn't talk about have not been outstanding. I did have a couple of more notes here. Danny Leyva, he's on my notes. He's a guy that's looked really good. I've heard a lot of good things. Seems to be a guy that has grown on the physical component that he's kind of lacked in the past. Jonathan Bell is a guy that also seems to be a guy that's had a really good camp. Stuart Hawkins is on my guys to watch, but kind of same of what we've already been looking at in general senses. And then last one, Yemer Gomez Andrade, obviously physically is really good. Had a couple of plays in that game against Hammarby where they get behind him or they get behind the defensive back line and he stick his big leg out, brings the ball back, cuts him in. So he looks like he's poised and ready for another big season. So that to me is worth highlighting. And I think that's all I had.
Yeah, I mean, at some point we'll probably have to talk about Josh Atencio's move as well, but that's something I'd like to get a little bit more data on that. I think what's more interesting about Atencio's move is sort of more what it says about the move to 3 in the back and sort of the way that the Sounders are rethinking their roster a little bit. But Nico, thank you for doing this. I'm just going to start calling you the co-host. But you can follow. We can follow you at El Rolo NW, right?
Yep, El Rolo NW
channel.
On socials. Pulsa Sports, of course, as well. You can follow some of my video content there. And man, I'm just excited to do this every week. Get as much
regularly recurring guest on Lobbing Scorchers as well, I should say.
Oh, yep. I'll be working with Lobbing Scorchers as well with Ari, whether it's the mornings or the afternoons on Mondays. So, man, I'm all in on.
You're all over the place.
Man. Yeah, Sandra Hart is that's my place, man. That's my home. So I'm excited to do a lot more for you guys.
All right, man. Well, Nico, thanks for doing this. I am Jeremiah O'Shan, signing off for No Sadietes from the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. We will catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one!